There exists a truth so profoundly intimate, so close to our very essence, that it remains almost perfectly hidden in plain sight. It is a power of such intensity that for millennia it has been systematically vilified, concealed, and twisted. Not because it was inherently malevolent, but because it held the key to unlocking humanity's direct experience of its own divinity. This primordial force goes by many names throughout history: Kundalini, the serpent fire; prana, the vital energy. Yet, there is one specific path, a sacred methodology walked by a select few and shrouded in the deepest recesses of our spiritual traditions. This path is known as sexual alchemy. From the sun-scorched stones of the Egyptian pyramids to the windswept monasteries of Tibet, from the cryptic pages of Hermetic texts to the intricate treatises of Tantra, an invisible, unbroken thread connects masters and initiates in a timeless art. This is the art of transmuting the raw, primal energy of desire into a conscious, creative force, a force capable of attracting, manifesting, and fundamentally transforming the fabric of reality itself. But this begs the question: why has this fundamental aspect of our being, our sexuality, been so thoroughly drenched in fear? Why were the sacred temples of the human body converted into territories of guilt and shame? What truly happens when this potent energy, instead of being scattered to the winds, is consciously gathered, elevated, and aimed toward a higher, more sublime purpose? Perhaps the answer to your deepest longing, be it for profound love, lasting prosperity, unshakable fulfillment, or spiritual expansion, is not found in the external world. Perhaps it lies dormant within you, waiting in how you choose to relate to your own inner fire. Today, we journey into a territory often labeled forbidden, not because it is dangerous, but because its potential for liberation is absolute. Are you prepared to reclaim what was taken? Since the dawn of human consciousness, our sexual nature has been perceived as a duality, a divine gift, and a perilous force. It is no mere coincidence that nearly every global mythology contains a story of fire, the ultimate symbol of desire, creation, and vital energy being stolen from the gods or challenged by mortals. Consider the myth of Prometheus in ancient Greece. He defied the gods, stealing their celestial fire and bestowing it upon humanity. This was not simply the fire for a hearth. It was the metaphorical flame of gnosis, the capacity to create, to master, to shape one's own destiny and transform reality. And the price for this transgression was severe: an eternity of punishment, chained to a rock, his liver the seat of passions devoured daily by an eagle. But this myth is more than a cautionary tale. It speaks of a sacred boundary imposed by the divine upon the mortal, a limit on our access to and conscious manipulation of our own creative life force. The ancients understood this implicitly. They knew that sexual energy is the inner fire. It is not merely the biological drive for procreation. It is the very spark of life, the engine of existence itself. This is precisely why the great wisdom traditions, from the rites of Isis in Egypt and the tantric practices of India to the Dionysian rituals of Greece, never drew a line separating the erotic from the spiritual. The body was understood to be a living, breathing temple. The sacred union of opposites in the physical act was a mirror, a microcosm of the grand cosmic dance of creation. The true masters always comprehended this dual nature of our vital energy. It is the very same force that can enslave us in a cycle of fleeting pleasure or, when mastered, open gateways to divine ecstasy. In the Hermetic tradition, this principle is masterfully symbolized in the caduceus of Hermes, two serpents, representing the twin polarities of energy, entwined around a central staff. That staff is the human spinal column, the central axis upon which the serpent fire lies dormant, awaiting the call to awaken. So, the critical question becomes, how was this sacred knowledge veiled throughout history? Why did sexuality, once held as a sacred key, become a source of taboo, sin, and profound shame? The answer lies in the immense, implicit power this energy confers upon the individual. Ancient civilizations knew that one who masters their own creative energy becomes the master of their own reality. A person who can govern their own internal fire has no need for external intermediaries, no need for institutional authorities to grant them access to the divine. They themselves become the temple, the priest, and the deity in one. Religious, political, and social institutions throughout history recognized this truth. They understood that to maintain control over the masses, it was essential to sever the connection between human beings and this innate source of personal power. And so, they engineered a great inversion. Pleasure was twisted into guilt, desire was branded as sin, and the body was recast as an enemy to be conquered. The sacred fire, which was meant to ascend the spine as pure light, began to descend, dissipating into the world like aimless smoke. In ancient Egypt, within the temples of Isis and Osiris, initiates were taught the practice of anastasis, the resurrection of the vital energy. This was not a literal revival of the dead, but the awakening of the dormant serpent fire within the living body. These initiates learned to consciously channel their sexual force, not to waste it, but to use it to nourish the higher centers of consciousness. They learned to guide it from the base of the spine to the crown of the head, transforming raw desire into piercing vision, animal instinct into profound intuition, and fleeting pleasure into enduring power. This creative energy is inherently ambivalent. It contains both eros and thanatos, the forces of life and death. It can nourish, or it can destroy. This is why ancient cultures surrounded sexuality with potent symbols, sacred rituals, and guiding myths. Their goal was not to repress it, but to protect it, to honor it. They knew that without conscious awareness, fire becomes a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. But with awareness, fire becomes illuminating light. Today, in our modern society, we exist within a deep and tragic paradox. We are inundated with sexual stimulation at every turn, yet we are, as a collective, energetically and spiritually, exhausted. We have lost the golden thread that once connected desire to the sacred. We have turned the inner fire into a public spectacle, a commercial product, an empty addiction. But the spark remains. It is still there, dormant, waiting to be rekindled, not through more external acts, but in the profound inner silence of the one who dares to look within. And perhaps this was the greatest theft of all, not the fire of the gods being given to humanity, but humanity being stolen from its own connection to the fire. Sexual alchemy, then, is the sacred art of recovering that lost fire. It is the conscious return to the inner garden, the Eden within, where the masculine and feminine, the sun and the moon, heaven and earth, finally meet not in the world outside, but within the temple of each and every one of us. And in that sacred meeting, there is no more separation. Desire is no longer the enemy. The body is no longer a prison. The fire is no longer a sin. The fire, at long last, is liberation. If our first chapter revealed that sexual energy is the fire stolen from the gods, here we enter the very heart of the magnum opus, the great work. This is the act of transforming that raw, untamed fire into a conscious, disciplined, creative force. Because it is not enough to simply possess the fire, one must learn how to wield it. The ancient alchemists called this process transmutation. It is a powerful word, but one that is often deeply misunderstood. Many believe that to transmute is to suppress, to control, or to repress. This is a fundamental error. To transmute is to take a substance in its densest, most primitive form, and to elevate its vibration to a more subtle, refined state without destroying its original essence. It is the art of turning lead into gold, not by denying the existence of the lead, but by unlocking its hidden potential. In the context of our vital, sexual energy, this means we do not seek to waste it, to dissolve it, or to lose it in the throes of unconscious orgasm. Instead, we learn to consciously channel it, to accumulate it, and to redirect it toward higher, self-chosen purposes. The great Taoist master, Mantak Chia, in his extensive writings on cultivating sexual energy, teaches that the human body is a celestial microcosm. Within it, energy meridians flow along specific pathways, connecting our organs to our vital centers. Sexual energy, he explains, can be consciously guided from the generative organs upward to the brain. It can be moved from the realm of pure instinct to the realm of high intuition, from raw desire to profound insight. This is not a vague spiritual metaphor. It is a concrete, physiological practice involving specific breathing techniques, focused visualization, and the subtle contraction of key muscle groups. The Tantric tradition calls this process sublimation, the guiding of energy, or prana, up through the subtle channels of the spine, from the root chakra, Muladhara, to the crown chakra, Sahasrara, awakening the sleeping serpent goddess, Kundalini, along the way. But the goal is not merely to retain sexual energy for its own sake. The ultimate goal is to transform its very quality. Wilhelm Reich, the controversial psychoanalyst who dared to confront the West's deep-seated taboo around sexual energy, argued that repressed or mismanaged orgasmic energy was the root cause of modern neurosis. But he also pointed toward a third way, the conscious integration of this energy. For Reich, this cosmic vital force, which he called orgone, could be stored and accumulated in the human body and utilized as a powerful creative force, not merely a sexual one. Herein lies the essential key to transmutation. Desire itself does not need to be eliminated. It needs to be purified. The sexual alchemist does not flee from desire, does not deny it, and certainly does not demonize it. They learn to face it directly, to stand in its immense power without being consumed by it. Imagine the raw power of a mighty river behind a dam. If you simply open the floodgates without direction, the resulting torrent destroys everything in its path. But if you channel that same water through a system of turbines, it generates enough electricity to power an entire city. In this analogy, desire is the water. Consciousness is the turbine. Hermetic traditions have long spoken of the importance of alchemical chastity. Again, this is not a call for literal, physical abstinence. It is a call to a state of being where one does not unconsciously squander the creative force. Yes, it is entirely possible to live a rich, active sexual life and still transmute this energy, so long as the act itself is elevated from a purely physical release to a conscious, ritualized, and intentional communion. Sexual alchemy is an inner symphony, where profound physical pleasure and sublime spiritual elevation can dance together in perfect harmony. As the awakened Kundalini energy ascends through each chakra, it represents the integration of a new level of consciousness, a purification of the energy from its densest aspects until it becomes pure, radiant light at the crown. But this process demands discipline, patience, and repetition. This is not a practice for a single night. It is a lifelong path, a path that, as the great alchemist Paracelsus noted, is not for the cowardly, nor for the impatient. This is why the alchemist always spoke of the secret fire, the fire that burns without consuming, the fire that warms without destroying. This fire is the mastered, purified, and transmuted sexual energy. When the alchemist learns how to keep this fire burning brightly without it consuming his own temple, he becomes an internal, inexhaustible source of power. What is the practical consequence of this? This inner fire translates into a palpable personal magnetism, an unexplainable charisma, a force of attraction that borders on the supernatural. The transmuted alchemist does not need to beg, to chase, or to demand. He or she attracts, not through the manipulation of others, but through the profound transformation of self. The desire that once desperately reached outward now radiates from within, and the world, like a perfectly obedient mirror, begins to reflect the vibration that is held at their core. This is true transmutation. Desire does not die. It is reborn as sovereign, creative power. But, as the ancient masters always warned, power without purity of intention is a perilous thing. That is why the heart must be purified before the fire is intensified. Because the greater the fire, the more brightly it illuminates, or the more devastatingly it burns. The art of transmutation, then, is not a magical trick to manipulate external reality. It is the oldest and most potent magic of all, the power to transform oneself. When sexual energy is successfully transmuted, it does not simply vanish. It transforms into an invisible, yet palpable, force that begins to radiate from within the human being. It functions like a powerful magnetic field, subtly influencing everything and everyone around it. The human body, in essence, becomes a living magnet. And this magnetization is not merely symbolic or metaphorical. It is bioenergetic, psychological, and spiritual. The great mystic philosopher Manly P. Hall wrote that the aura of a true initiate becomes luminous and intensely vibrant, radiating an influence that magnetizes their surroundings, often without a single word being spoken. This magnetism is felt. It cannot be seen with the naked eye, but it acts like a form of personal gravity, a force of attraction that transcends physical appearance, eloquent speech, or social status. Modern science is only just beginning to scratch the surface of this ancient phenomenon. Studies in bioelectromagnetism have already confirmed that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field thousands of times more powerful than that of the brain. Groundbreaking research by the HeartMath Institute suggests that this field not only influences our own body's physiology, but also interacts with the electromagnetic fields of those around us, indicating a subtle yet constant energetic communication between individuals. But the mystics and alchemists went much further. They affirmed that our vital sexual energy, when sublimated and elevated, massively amplifies this personal aura, this energetic field, this invisible magnetism. It is as if the body ceases to be a simple consumer of energy and instead becomes an inner sun, radiating specific frequencies that are capable of attracting people, events, and situations that are aligned with that same vibration. Taoism calls this quality Te, or magnetic virtue, the natural, effortless power of attraction that arises in one who is perfectly aligned with the Tao, the natural flow of the universe. In Hermeticism, it is the manifestation of the astral light, the ethereal, energetic field where all thoughts, emotions, and intentions are recorded and circulate. When transmuted, sexual energy is consciously deposited into this astral light. It begins to shape probabilities, gently bending the pathways of reality in the direction of one's conscious intention. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung, in his deep reflections on the collective unconscious, noted that eros is not just the sexual instinct, but the fundamental psychic force that connects and unites all things. This force operates silently, weaving invisible threads between people, events, and opportunities. Herein lies a profound paradox of existence. The more desperately someone seeks for something externally, love, success, validation, the more reality seems to retreat from them. Conversely, the more someone overflows with wholeness and power from within, the more reality is drawn toward them. True magnetism is not an effort to attract. It is a state of being. This is why the great masters of sexual alchemy throughout history were often described as fascinating, irresistible, and radiant, not necessarily because of their physical appearance, but because they carried a dense, vibrant, and luminous energy field. This magnetism was also known as true personal power, not the modern, debased sense of power used to manipulate or control others, but the power of being so full, so whole, and so complete within oneself that the universe itself begins to reorganize around that new center of gravity. Sexual alchemy, therefore, doesn't just attract romantic or sexual partners. It attracts opportunities, synchronicities, abundance, and divine insights. This is because creative energy, when it is not being constantly leaked, will always seek other outlets for its expression. If it is not exhausted in fleeting physical pleasure, it transforms into boundless creativity, unshakable courage, and penetrating vision. Nikola Tesla, one of the most brilliant inventive minds in modern history, directly attributed his immense creative capacity to his conscious sublimation of sexual energy. Accounts suggest that Tesla practiced celibacy, not out of a sense of moralism or repression, but because he understood that this vital energy was his creative fuel. He transformed it into unwavering focus, world-changing inventions, and a direct connection to the universal field of ideas. The modern sexual alchemist may or may not choose a path of celibacy like Tesla. It is not the literal abstinence that generates this magnetism, but the consciousness behind the use of energy. It is the deliberate application of this force. It is the act of maintaining an elevated intention and an awakened presence, even in the midst of profound physical pleasure. To not lose the center means to not be completely overtaken by the automatism of pleasure, like one who acts on raw impulse without direction. It means being fully present with body, mind, and soul anchored in the same place at the same time. The forgetting of the self occurs when raw desire takes the reins and conscious awareness fades into the background. This is when pleasure becomes a mere escape instead of a sacred portal. It is when the human being is reduced to a reactive mechanism, losing the golden thread of presence. That is the real waste. Not the release of energy itself, but the fact that it escapes without intention, without purpose, without consciousness. An unconscious orgasm drains the system, because it disperses vital force with no energetic return on investment. A conscious orgasm, however, nourishes the entire being because it elevates that same force and reintegrates it into the practitioner's energetic body. When this energy is consistently transmuted, it begins to vibrate at higher, more subtle frequencies. It is like casting a stone into a perfectly still lake. The ripples expand, they touch the distant shores, and then they return to the center. Everything you send out into the universe eventually comes back. But in the practice of sexual alchemy, what you are sending out is not just a mental intention. It is an intention that is supercharged with raw, vital, creative energy. And that gives immense weight, force, and magnetism to your desires. This is precisely why, in all tantric and hermetic traditions, a solemn warning is always given. To practice transmutation without first purifying the heart is to create a powerful, aimless magnet. Because sexual energy amplifies everything. If there is unresolved shadow within you, greed, anger, jealousy, it will amplify the shadow. If there is light within you, love, compassion, wisdom, it will amplify the light. Invisible magnetism, then, is not a mere technique to get what you want. It is a sacred path to become what you desire to attract. And by becoming that, the universe has no choice but to respond in kind. The external world is merely a mirror reflecting your inner vibration, and transmuted sexual energy is the act of polishing that mirror until it shines with a divine brilliance. It begins to reflect, with stunning clarity, what truly resides at the center of your being. In the end, the most profound secret is this. We do not attract what we ask for with our words. We attract what we are with our vibration. And sexual alchemy is the ancient, sacred process of raising that self to its highest possible resonance, so that everything around you naturally comes into harmony with it. This magnetism cannot be taught in a book. It cannot be faked. It cannot be bought. It simply emanates, and wherever its influence reaches, the world responds. Because at its very core, the entire universe dances in orbit around the one who has dared to become a sun. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of ancient wisdom. If this exploration resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this ancient teaching speaks to you the most?